Africa's retail sales growth is not meeting expectations due to factors such as load shedding and high inflation. As consumers feel the pinch, retailers sold fewer items than they did last year. For more on this, I'm joined by consumer expert Gerhard van der Merwe. Gerhard, I appreciate your time this evening. Now, it all seems the conversations around high interest rates, load shedding and a stagnant economy, and that's affected South African consumer spending habits.
Yes, Hugo, definitely. I think South African consumers are definitely very, very cash-strapped at the moment. They're being battered from all sides. If you look at the current food inflation, it's sitting at around about 11.1%. Food prices keep on increasing as well. The average household basket has increased to just under 5,082 Rand. Just in the last month alone, eggs, potatoes, bologna prices has increased with 5% or more. The interest rate hikes, apologies for that, have led to a year-on-year increase of 27% on mortgage payments, and obviously that's passed down to other consumers in the form of increased rentals. The new Eskom tariff hikes took effect at the beginning of July. Most municipal rates and taxes for property owners have increased as well from the beginning of July. One of the factors highlighted by the Mr. Price Group when they issued their current sales or the new sales stats is that wage growth is at the lowest that it's been since 1994, which is terrible, obviously. Consumers, you can see when you look at the stats for new defaults on new loans in terms of credit agreements, that's increased, and it's not just the lower and the middle class households that are being affected. For the first time in a very long time, the wealthy segment, as they call it, of the credit market has shown a substantial number of defaults on mortgage payments and on vehicle finance agreements. So it just goes to show you that everyone is feeling the pinch. Then I just heard the latest on the fuel and diesel increases for next month. That obviously has a knock-on effect because transport of basic products to retailers increases. They need to either absorb that cost or that's passed down to the consumer at the end of the day.
Well, Gerhard, let's focus a little bit on, I mean, all too often when we have these conversations around inflation and so on and the high cost of living, we're talking about the consumer and seldom have a conversation about the retailer. Right now, what are the options that are available to retailers to stay in business? Because that's ultimately what they're trying to do. If people aren't buying as much as they were, but your expenses aren't coming down, then you need to make a plan.
Yes, definitely. Look, for retailers, it's tough as well because consumers are spending less. With load shedding added on to that, a lot of the retailers that aren't necessarily in a big shopping mall need to pay exorbitant amounts for petrol and diesel just to have generators to keep the lights on. So retailers definitely need to analyze and see where consumer spending trends have changed, and they would need to adapt to that. And to one of the major shifts is that a lot of consumers are now focusing on online shopping, which obviously creates a reduction in the number of feet that you have in your physical shop, and that results in less impulse buys where you would go to the shop and if you're a bit hungry while you're doing your shopping, you would buy chocolate or some biscuits or whatever. When you do online shopping, that doesn't happen because you know what you need to buy and you just buy that. Consumers are also focusing a lot on loyalty programs at the moment, and they prefer to shop at retailers that have good loyalty programs with great benefits and savings for them. So definitely that's something that retailers would have to look into to expand their offerings in terms of loyalty programs, discounts, etc.
So let's come back to those impulse purchases, and obviously they're certain products that are within the impulse purchasing category, and many of these would be at your till points, right? Are these particularly more affected than other products? And if so, how are the retailers, or certainly the producers of these products, dealing with this decline that's obviously impacting them significantly?
Look, definitely, like you said, it's all those items that are on your way to the till. There has been a significant decrease in the snack market, as they call it, the snack products, which is, well, your chocolates, your sweets, your biscuits, crisps, all of those, because people are not just even when impulse buying, people are a lot more budget conscious, so they do not necessarily purchase these items anymore. Obviously, all of those have become very expensive. The price of cooking oil has increased by 40%. So if you look at manufacturing chips, for example, obviously it becomes a lot more expensive for the producers, and consumers aren't buying that anymore. So I'm not a marketing expert as such, but I would say that producers would have to most probably start diversifying their offering, and you don't necessarily want the producers or the retailers to absorb all the costs, but consumers are becoming more savvy on what they want to spend their money on and what not.
No, so how are retailers in the clothing sector, for instance, faring compared to grocery retailers, and what factors contribute to the differences in their sales performances?
Well, in the clothing industry, or clothing retail industry as such, it's even harder than for the normal grocery retailers at the moment. Remember, they need to, well, most of them import a lot of their goods. With the current exchange rates, that makes it quite expensive. Most of the clothing retailers that have put out their latest sales stats have shown a decrease in volume, especially as well when it comes to discretionary buys. If you look at Mr. Price Home, for example, which is mainly discretionary buys, they've shown a decrease in volume. And clothing is also part of the discretionary spends that consumers are cutting back on, because they are going for cheaper options, not buying as many clothes as they normally would, and basically just buying the bare necessities.
Now, one of the things I've seen online is around Amazon cashless stores, I think, where you walk in and basically with your card or something to that effect. I'm not even sure if this is real, but you walk in, you pick up items in the store, and you're billed as you walk out. So it almost seems a means of cutting back on the amount of labour costs that you would have to spend if you're a retailer. Are we looking at South African businesses in the retail sector looking at those sort of innovations in the not too distant future in order to counter some of these challenges?
I think a lot of the retailers are actually looking towards that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, at some point, Checkers decided to launch a similar store either in Joburg or in Cape Town. I don't know whether that actually happened and how that went at the end of the day, but it is definitely something for retailers to consider. Even if it's not just the card payment, which is great, and with technology nowadays, if you look at going to Europe or any of those places, you have your till where you just scan your items, you pay the exact amount in cash, or you tap your card and you go. So definitely when it comes to labor especially, that is something that I think retailers would be moving to or towards, which unfortunately would also have a knock-on effect on retrenchments and the unemployment rates.
So coming back to consumer patterns or consumer purchase patterns, based on some of the conversations that we're having now, where consumers are more hard pressed, has their buying patterns altered considerably outside, obviously, of online purchases? I'd imagine that there are many people that aren't going to a delivery sort of purchase, but have their purchases been impacted, or the style of buying, the products that they consume? Do they, for instance, move away from a particular type of bread to another type of bread, or do they shift products in this process, or are they more aware about what costs less versus what potentially would cost them a little bit more if they purchased it?
Yes, definitely. Consumers are now bargain hunting, if I can put it that way. So they are checking discounts, specials on a more frequent basis than they would have normally done. They don't necessarily go to a single retailer to purchase all their monthly groceries. They would buy whatever is the best value for the best price at a certain retailer and do the same for the rest of their monthly groceries and necessities at another retailer. What's also become a trend is that consumers are buying in bulk more than they previously had. So retailers don't necessarily offer you that option, or are slightly seeing the difference or the reduction in their volumes as well. Consumers are definitely also moving from more expensive brands to cheaper brands, comparable products, or the house brands that most of the major retailers in South Africa do have.
So are the other house brands flourishing then?
Yes, they are. Consumers are really moving towards that more than they previously did, simply in an effort to save some money.
I have to ask this mid question, if you will, Gerhard. Is the quality of those house brands comparable to what they would pay 4 or 5 rand more for another product that isn't a house brand?
I personally believe so. I don't think there's anything wrong with the house brands. A big chunk of why the house brands are cheaper than the normal well-known brands is that when you look at the packaging, it's plain and simple. You don't need to, it's not embellished, and it doesn't have a lot of pictures or whatever on it. But quality-wise, I wouldn't say that there's a major discrepancy.
Gerhard van der Merwe, consumer expert, appreciate your insights this evening.